The sky above Zora's homeworld was no longer the clear blue it used to be. Now it was a fiery orange, filled with dark clouds that rolled across like angry beasts. The planet had fallen. For days, Zora had hidden in the deep forests, surviving on whatever she could scavenge. Her people, her civilization, were wiped out in a brutal attack from a merciless alien race. She had fought with everything she had, but there was nothing left to protect. The enemy had overrun the cities, destroyed the military strongholds, and taken control of everything. Zora was one of the few left alive, an elite warrior from a proud species, now stranded in a devastated world. The sound of the wind howled as it whipped through the trees, carrying with it the distant screams of creatures Zora had never seen before. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from a deep sense of loss. She could still hear the echoes of her family, her comrades, the voices that would never again call out her name. It was a harsh reality to face. The world as she knew it was gone, and now it was just her, alone, on a dying planet. Suddenly, there was a loud rustling sound from behind her. Zora's instincts kicked in. She spun around, her hand reaching for the blade strapped to her side. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the thick underbrush, searching for the source of the noise. For a moment, everything was still. Too still. Zora's sharp eyes caught a flicker of movement, something large and fast. It was then that she saw it. A massive beast, unlike anything she had ever encountered before, was charging toward her. Its scales shimmered with an eerie, unnatural glow, and its eyes burned with a ferocious hunger. It was no simple predator. This creature was something more. Zora's heart raced. She had faced beasts before, but this one was different. Bigger, stronger, and faster than anything she'd ever fought. The beast lunged at her, its jaws wide open, teeth bared and dripping with venom. Zora barely dodged, rolling to the side as the creature's massive body slammed into a tree, splintering it with ease. She quickly regained her footing, drawing her blade and preparing for the inevitable fight. This wasn't just about survival. It was about asserting control, showing this beast that it had underestimated her. Her heart beat like a war drum as she circled the creature, every muscle in her body tensed and ready for the next strike. The beast snarled, its claws scraping against the ground as it prepared for another attack. Zora's eyes locked onto its glowing, malevolent gaze. She could feel the power in her legs, the adrenaline surging through her veins, making her faster, stronger than she had ever been. Just as the beast made its move, Zora leaped into the air, twisting her body to avoid its sharp claws. She landed gracefully on a nearby rock, her blade raised high. In one fluid motion, she charged at the creature, aiming for its neck. But in that moment, everything changed. There was a sharp, unnatural noise, a sound that didn't belong to this planet. Zora froze, her blade inches from the creature's neck. Her instincts screamed at her to turn around, but her gaze remained fixed on the beast before her. A strange energy filled the air, vibrating through the ground beneath her feet. And then, out of nowhere, a flash of light illuminated the dark forest. A human, a man, crashed through the underbrush, landing right between Zora and the creature. He was dressed in a tattered spacesuit, his face bloodied and bruised, but his eyes held an undeniable strength. Zora blinked, disbelief flashing across her face. What was a human doing here, on this dead world, in the middle of this chaos? The man didn't hesitate. He pushed Zora aside with surprising strength, aiming a blaster at the beast. The creature turned, momentarily distracted by the new threat. Without waiting for the beast to react, the human fired. A beam of bright energy shot out, striking the creature square in the chest. It roared in pain, thrashing violently before it crumpled to the ground dead. Zora stood there, stunned, watching as the man holstered his weapon and turned toward her. He looked at her for a long moment, his chest heaving with effort. Before he spoke, his voice raspy but filled with determination. "You're not alone," he said simply. "Not anymore." Zora's mind raced. She had never seen a human before. Her people had never encountered them, at least not in any meaningful way. She had heard rumors, of course, of humans being resilient, of their fighting spirit. But seeing one here, on this barren world, in the middle of an apocalypse, was something she couldn't have imagined. For a moment, she considered striking him down. After all, humans were known to be a threat, dangerous, unpredictable. But then she remembered the state of the world around her. Zara had fought alongside countless warriors, but now, all that was left was an empty wasteland. Perhaps, just perhaps, this human could be the ally she needed. She had no other choice. "You've got a name?" she asked, her voice cold but curious. "Liam," the man replied. "I'm from Earth." Zara studied him, her sharp eyes scanning every inch of his battered form. He was smaller than most of her kind, and his face was covered in dirt and blood. But there was something about him, something she couldn't quite place. It was as if he had a fire inside him, a determination that burned brighter than any enemy she had ever faced. "You're from Earth," she repeated. "Why are you here?" Liam's gaze darkened for a moment, but he quickly shook his head. "Long story. I was part of a scouting mission. Ship went down. I've been looking for survivors. Guess I'm lucky to find you." Zara didn't respond immediately. She wasn't sure what to make of this human. She had no reason to trust him. Yet, in a world so broken, where everything she knew had been torn apart, there was something strangely comforting about having another living soul nearby, even if that soul was human. "You're going to need me," Zara finally said, her voice steady and certain. "The beasts aren't the only danger. The world itself is a battlefield now. If we're going to survive, we need to stick together." Liam nodded, the faintest hint of relief crossing his features. "I couldn't agree more." For the first time since the apocalypse began, Zara allowed herself to hope. She wasn't alone anymore. She had found an ally in the most unexpected of places. Now together, they would have to fight for their survival. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and decay as Zara and Liam moved through the forest, the tall trees around them now twisted and broken, their once vibrant green leaves now scorched and barren. The sky above had darkened, but not from nightfall. No, it was the aftermath of the war that had turned their world upside down. The planet was a shell of what it used to be, a once thriving place now reduced to ruins. Zara's heart was heavy, a constant reminder of the destruction her people had suffered. Liam, though, seemed to adjust quicker than she had expected. Despite his initial surprise at being in such a hostile place, he walked with purpose, his steps firm, as if he had faced danger like this before. His blaster, which he had used to kill the beast moments before, was still slung across his chest. It seemed like an extension of him now, his only true companion in this hostile environment. Zara couldn't help but feel a mix of admiration and curiosity toward him. She had been alone for so long, her world reduced to the hunt for survival. And now, here was this human, strange yet undeniably strong, by her side. "I didn't expect to find anyone alive," Zara said, breaking the silence as they trekked through the forest. Her voice was steady, though there was an undercurrent of sadness. She had learned not to hope for much anymore, but Liam's presence was different. It brought a flicker of something she hadn't felt in weeks, perhaps even months, since the war started. A sense of connection, of possibility. Liam glanced over at her, his face weathered from the harsh conditions, but his eyes still held a spark of life, of determination. "Neither did I," he replied. "But sometimes hope shows up when you least expect it." Zara couldn't help but scoff lightly, though it wasn't from mockery. It was the first time in ages that someone had given her an answer that didn't sound hollow. It was almost as if he believed it too, believed that things could be better, that they could survive. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe she was foolish to let herself even entertain such thoughts. But there was something in the way he spoke, in the way he held himself. It was different from any other human she'd ever heard of. "How long have you been on this world?" she asked, her eyes scanning the overgrown landscape for any signs of movement, for any more predators lurking in the shadows. "A couple of days," Liam answered, his tone serious. "My ship crashed not far from here. I was part of a crew sent to investigate this planet. But once we landed, things went south fast. We got hit by one of their orbital bombardments, dropped us straight into the middle of it. I've been trying to find survivors ever since." Zara nodded, her mind racing. She had heard stories of human soldiers, of their resilience, their refusal to give up even when the odds were against them. Yet hearing it firsthand, from someone who had lived through such a brutal experience, made her realize just how far the human spirit could stretch. She admired that, though it was something she could never fully understand. Her people fought for honor, for the preservation of their civilization. But humans, they fought for each other. "I've seen worse," Zara said after a beat, her voice quiet, as though speaking the words aloud made them more real. "The orbital bombardment, it was just the beginning. The enemy has ways of making sure no one escapes. They've been systematically wiping out everything." Liam's expression softened slightly. "You don't have to go through it alone anymore." Zara couldn't quite bring herself to respond to that. She wasn't sure what to say. She hadn't allowed anyone to get close in a long time, not since the war started. Not since she'd lost everything. She had kept herself distant, her heart locked away for fear of losing more. She had seen enough death to last a lifetime, and she was certain there was more to come. The pair continued to move through the wreckage, past the shattered remnants of cities, where the only signs of life were the scavenging creatures who had adapted to the new, hostile world. For a brief moment, they seemed to be in a world of their own, a place where survival was everything, where hope could be found in the unlikeliest of places. They reached a clearing where a wrecked ship lay half-buried in the dirt, its hull charred and cracked from the crash. Zara stopped and looked at it for a long moment, then turned to Liam. "Your ship?" she asked. Though it wasn't a question, it was a confirmation. Liam nodded. "Yeah, that's the one. We tried to make a safe landing, but, well, as you can see, that didn't work out." Zara approached the ship cautiously, her sharp eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. She had learned long ago to never let her guard down, not even for a second. Liam followed, his footsteps quieter than she had expected. She glanced back at him, wondering how someone like him could remain so calm after all he had been through. "You said you were looking for survivors," Zara said, trying to keep her mind occupied, pushing aside the thoughts of grief that always seemed to follow her. "You found me. But what about your crew? Did they?" Liam's face tightened, and for a moment, Zara saw a flicker of something dark in his eyes. He didn't respond immediately, and she didn't press. The loss of comrades, of friends, was something she understood too well. After a long silence, he spoke again, his voice softer this time. "They didn't make it," he said simply. Zara nodded, understanding. The weight of loss was something she knew all too well. Her people had suffered, yes, but it was the personal losses, the faces of those who had fought beside you, who had trusted you, that stayed with you the longest. Zara had seen it in the eyes of every soldier she had fought alongside. It never left. She turned to face him. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice low. Liam shook his head, nothing to apologize for. "We all make our choices. We fight, and sometimes we lose." His words were firm, but his expression softened. "What about you? Are you alone here, Zara?" Zara hesitated for a moment, her gaze lingering on the wreckage of the ship. She didn't know if she could let this human in. She had to be careful, to keep her distance. But a part of her, the part that still remembered what it was like to have someone at your side, was tempted to trust him. Maybe, just maybe, this human would be the key to surviving the apocalypse. "Yes," she finally said. "I'm alone, but no longer." She gave him a slight, almost imperceptible smile. "I think we can help each other. For the first time in what felt like forever, Zara allowed herself to believe in the possibility of hope. She had a partner now, someone to watch her back, someone to fight with. And in this desolate world, that was the most important thing of all. Together, they would face whatever horrors this new world had in store for them. The forest grew darker with every passing minute, the thick canopy above casting long, twisted shadows on the uneven ground. Zara and Liam moved cautiously, their senses alert to the slightest noise, the faintest rustle of leaves or crack of a twig beneath their feet. Despite the quiet, there was an underlying tension in the air. The atmosphere felt heavy, like something dangerous was lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. Liam adjusted his grip on his blaster, his eyes scanning the surroundings. He had fought in many battles, but this place was unlike anything he had encountered before. There were no familiar signs of civilization, no markers of where the enemy might be, just trees, rocks, and the ever-present feeling that they were being watched. Zara was a few steps ahead, her movements graceful and fluid, as if she had become one with the forest. She was used to this, used to being surrounded by danger, always prepared for the unexpected. "We need to keep moving," Zara said, her voice steady, but there was a hint of urgency in it. "The beasts aren't the only things we need to worry about out here." Liam frowned. "Beasts. I've seen the creatures in this place. They're vicious, sure, but what else could there be?" Zara glanced back at him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "It's not just the animals. There are others here. I don't know who or what they are, but I've seen signs, tracks, broken branches, footprints that don't belong to any creature I've ever known. And I'm not taking any chances." Liam nodded, the gravity of her words sinking in. It wasn't just the physical dangers they had to worry about. It was the unknown forces that might be stalking them from the shadows. He couldn't deny that he had seen enough to know that this world was far from ordinary. But the idea of other beings, humanoid or otherwise, made his skin crawl. They had to stay alert. They walked in silence for a while, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the thick underbrush. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the occasional call of a distant bird or the whisper of wind through the trees. But just when Liam thought they might finally get a moment of peace, a strange sound shattered the stillness. A low growl, deep and guttural, echoed through the trees. Zara's body tensed immediately, her posture shifting as she moved into a defensive stance. "Get down," she hissed, her voice urgent. Liam didn't hesitate. He dropped to the ground beside her, his hand instinctively reaching for his blaster. The growl came again, closer this time, and then he heard something that made his blood run cold. The sound of something large moving through the underbrush, snapping branches as it approached. Zara held up her hand, signaling for him to stay quiet. She was listening, her sharp eyes scanning the darkness. Then, without warning, she turned to him and whispered, "It's coming. Stay close, and stay quiet." Liam nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. Whatever it wasn't friendly. The growl was unmistakable, a sound that spoke of a creature far beyond anything he had encountered in his years as a soldier. He could feel the tension in the air, a kind of oppressive weight that made it hard to breathe. From the corner of his eye, Liam saw movement. It was quick, too quick, and before he could even process what was happening, Zara had already moved. She was a blur of motion, her body fluid as she darted forward, her hand reaching for a dagger strapped to her thigh. The growl became louder, more distinct, and then it emerged from the shadows. An enormous creature, its eyes glowing the deep red, its body covered in dark, matted fur. Liam didn't have time to think. The beast lunged at Zara, its jaws snapping wide open, but she was faster. She sidestepped the attack with practiced ease, her blade flashing in the dim light as it cut through the air. The creature let out a roar of pain, but it wasn't deterred. It swung its massive claws at her, but she was already gone, disappearing into the underbrush, only to reappear on the other side. ready for her next strike. Liam scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. He wasn't sure how he could help. He had no idea what kind of weapon would be effective against this beast, but one thing was clear: he couldn't just stand there. He aimed his blaster at the creature, his hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The shot rang out, a sharp crack in the night, and the creature staggered back, briefly disoriented by the impact. Zara wasted no time. She seized the opportunity, moving in on the creature with deadly precision. Her blade found its mark, cutting through the beast's thick fur and into its flesh. The creature let out a deafening roar, thrashing wildly as it tried to swipe at her. But Zara was too fast, too skilled, her movements like a dance as she evaded each attack. Liam fired again, hitting the creature in its side, but it wasn't enough. The beast turned its attention on him, its glowing eyes narrowing as it stalked toward him. He took a step back, but the creature was too quick, lunging at him with a roar that shook the ground. In that moment, everything seemed to slow down. His instincts kicked in, and he dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's claws as they swiped through the air, just inches from his body. Zara was there in an instant, her dagger flashing once more. She drove it deep into the creature's flank, and this time it didn't move. The beast let out a final, guttural growl before collapsing to the ground with a thud. Liam took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest as he watched Zara step back from the fallen creature, her blade slick with blood. The fight had been intense, brutal, but Zara had handled it like a seasoned warrior. He couldn't help but feel a surge of respect for her. She was a force to be reckoned with, and he was lucky to have her by his side. "Are you all right?" Zara asked, her voice calm despite the danger they had just faced. Liam nodded, though he couldn't hide the shakiness in his hands. "Yeah, I'm fine. But that was close." Zara gave him a brief, almost imperceptible smile. "It's not over yet. We have to keep moving. There are more of them out here, and we don't want to be caught off guard." Liam nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. They had survived this encounter, but the dangers of this world were far from over. They were in it together now, and no matter what came next, they would face it side by side. The bond between them had grown stronger with each passing moment, and as they continued their journey through the forest, Liam couldn't help but feel a sense of determination. He wasn't going to let anything happen to Zara. The sun was beginning to set, casting a deep orange glow across the horizon as Zara and Liam trekked through the dense forest. The air was thick with humidity, and the scent of damp earth filled their nostrils. As much as Liam wanted to focus on the trail ahead, his mind kept drifting back to the creature they had just defeated. It had been unlike any beast he had ever encountered before. Larger, faster, and more aggressive. It seemed almost unnatural. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong with this world. Zara led the way, her pace steady and sure, but her eyes constantly scanned the area around them, always alert. Despite the brief moments of peace, it felt as though the forest was alive with danger. The ground was covered in thick underbrush, and the twisted roots of ancient trees seemed to claw at their feet. The trees themselves appeared otherworldly, their trunks wide and gnarled, their branches twisting in strange, unnatural patterns. It was as if this place had been altered by some force beyond comprehension. They continued in silence, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Liam couldn't help but wonder what had caused the apocalypse, the cataclysm that had decimated entire civilizations and left only ruins behind. There were rumors of a great war, one that had torn apart entire planets. Some said it was a battle between advanced technologies. Others whispered that it was the result of some kind of ancient curse. But no one really knew for sure. The truth had been buried beneath the ashes of the old world, and all that remained were the shattered remnants of what once was. Zara broke the silence, her voice low and thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder what happened to this place?" Liam looked at her, his brow furrowed. What do you mean? This world. It wasn't always like this, Zara said, her gaze distant. I remember it. I remember how it used to be. The cities, the people, the technology. There was so much life here before everything fell apart. Liam was stunned. He had thought Zara had grown up in this wilderness, but it seemed she was from a time long before the apocalypse. It made sense, though. Her skills, her survival instincts, they weren't just from living in this hostile environment. She had once known a world where civilization thrived, where the very things that had destroyed it now seemed like distant memories. He couldn't even begin to imagine what that must have been like for her. You remember? Liam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara nodded slowly. I do, but those memories are fading. Sometimes I can still see the cities in my mind, the tall buildings and the lights, but they're slipping away, lost to time. All that's left now is this. Liam didn't know what to say. He had always thought of the apocalypse as something distant, something that had happened long before his time. But for Zara, it was a living memory, a world she had lost and would never see again. He felt a pang of sympathy for her, but he also felt a deep sense of determination. Whatever had caused the fall of this world, whatever had brought it to its knees, it had to be stopped. He couldn't let it happen again, not if there was a chance to change the future. There has to be something we can do, Liam said, his voice filled with conviction. We can't just let this place die. There's got to be a way to fix it. Zara's expression softened, and she turned to face him. I used to believe that. I thought we could rebuild, that we could restore what was lost. But after everything I've seen, I'm not so sure anymore. The world we knew is gone, Liam. It's been replaced by something darker, something far more dangerous. There are forces at work here that we don't even begin to understand. Liam's mind raced. What could she mean? What forces were out there, beyond the beasts and the wilderness? As they walked deeper into the forest, the feeling of unease only grew stronger. There was something hidden here, something buried beneath the earth, waiting to be discovered. He could feel it in his bones. Without warning, Zara stopped in her tracks, her body tense, her eyes scanning the area. Do you hear that? Liam strained his ears. At first, he heard nothing but the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. But then, faintly, he heard a low hum, a rhythmic vibration that seemed to pulse through the ground itself. It was coming from somewhere ahead, deep in the heart of the forest. What is that? Liam asked, his voice tight with curiosity and fear. I don't know, Zara replied, her tone grim. But I heard it before. It's a signal, an energy source of some kind. It's not natural, Liam. It's artificial. Liam's heart skipped a beat. Artificial? You mean like technology. But everything here is supposed to be destroyed. Zara interrupted. Yes, that's what we were meant to believe. But it's a lie. The technology didn't just disappear. It's buried, hidden, waiting for someone to find it. And if we're hearing it now, that means it's still active. The idea of technology still being out there, something that had survived the apocalypse, sent a chill down Liam's spine. What kind of technology could have survived such a catastrophe? And why was it still broadcasting a signal, calling out to anyone who would listen? Without another word, Zara began moving toward the source of the hum, her movements cautious but purposeful. Liam followed close behind, his thoughts racing. What was the truth behind the apocalypse? What had caused it? And what was this technology that had survived, seemingly untouched by the devastation? As they drew closer, the hum grew louder, more distinct. They were almost there, but the closer they got, the more Liam felt a sense of dread settle in his chest. Whatever was ahead, it was something far beyond anything they had encountered so far. It wasn't just a threat to their survival. It was a reminder that there were forces out there that could change everything. Forces that could unravel the fragile hope they had left. Finally, they arrived at the source of the hum. Hidden beneath the thick underbrush, covered in vines and debris, was something that looked like a massive metal structure, part of a long-forgotten machine, a relic of the old world. Its surface was pitted and scorched, but it was still alive, still pulsing with energy, its lights flickering faintly in the fading light. Zora crouched beside it, her hand brushing against the surface. "This is it," she whispered, awe and fear in her voice. "This is what I've been searching for. This is the key to everything." Liam looked at the machine, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. He had no idea what it was, but one thing was certain. It wasn't just a remnant of the past. It was a sign that the apocalypse wasn't over. It was just the beginning of something much, much worse. The world around them seemed to tremble as the machine's hum grew louder, its lights flashing with a rhythm that pulsed through the ground. Zara and Liam stood motionless, the weight of the moment sinking in. They had discovered the source of the signal, the key to understanding the apocalypse, but the answer was far more terrifying than either of them had imagined. The machine was not just a relic of the past. It was a weapon, a tool of destruction far more powerful than anything they had ever encountered. Liam's mind raced as he processed the reality before him. What was this machine? And who had created it? The apocalypse had not been a random disaster. It had been planned, engineered. This machine was the proof. It wasn't just an artifact of the old world. It was a remnant of the force that had brought it all to its knees. The past had come back to haunt them. And now they had to face the consequences. "This isn't good," Liam muttered under his breath, eyes wide as he stared at the machine. The lights flickered again, and a low rumble echoed through the earth. Zara's face was hard, her eyes filled with determination. "We don't have much time. If we don't stop this now, the whole planet will fall. This is what caused the destruction, the war, the cataclysm. This machine, it's part of a bigger system, one that controls everything." Liam's heart sank. A control system, but how does it work? Zora looked at him, her gaze fierce. "This machine is a transmitter, broadcasting a signal to other machines across the world. It's activating weapons, triggering defenses, and calling in reinforcements. This is the final piece of the puzzle. If we don't shut it down, everything will spiral out of control." The weight of Zora's words hit him hard. He had known that the world had been destroyed by something, but he hadn't realized just how deep the corruption ran. This wasn't just a world torn apart by natural disasters or animal attacks. It was a world torn apart by technology, by a system that had turned against its creators. And now, it was calling back the power that had once ruled it all. Liam took a step forward, his fists clenched. He had to stop this. He had to stop it before it was too late. But how? The machine was massive, far more complicated than anything he had ever seen. There were no clear switches, no obvious ways to disable it. It was as if the entire structure was designed to resist interference, to keep anyone from ever shutting it down. As he reached out, Zara stopped him with a hand on his arm. "We can't just rush in blindly. This thing is designed to fight back. We need to be smart." Liam nodded, taking a deep breath. His mind flashed back to all the battles he had fought, all the training he had gone through. He had faced death countless times, but this was different. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight to change the future. "We need to find its power source," Zora continued. "If we can disrupt its energy, we might have a chance of bringing it down. But it won't be easy." They both turned back to the machine, scanning its surface for any sign of weakness. The hum was growing louder, the lights flashing more erratically. Time was running out. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the forest, followed by the screeching sound of metal tearing. The ground beneath their feet began to shake violently as the air grew thick with energy. Something was happening. "What's going on?" Liam asked, his voice tight with panic. Zara's face went pale. "It's activating. The machines. They're coming." Before Liam could ask what she meant, a shadow loomed over them. The first of the machines emerged from the trees, massive, towering figures with sleek, metallic bodies and glowing red eyes. They were armed, their weapons designed for devastation, and they were here to protect the transmitter. Liam's pulse quickened as he reached for his weapon. This was it, the final battle. The machines were here, and they weren't going down without a fight. Zara drew her own weapon, a sleek energy blade that hummed with power. Together, they prepared to face the oncoming storm. The first machine charge, its massive metal frame crashing through the underbrush. Zara was the first to react, darting forward with incredible speed. She slashed her blade across the machine's leg, but it barely seemed to notice. The creature retaliated with a swift strike, sending her tumbling backward. Liam acted without thinking. He rushed toward the machine, using his agility to dodge its incoming strikes. His own weapon, a plasma rifle, fired in quick succession, each blast hitting the machine's chest. Sparks flew, and the creature staggered, but it didn't fall. "We need to focus on the power core," Zara shouted, struggling to her feet. She pointed to a glowing blue orb embedded in the center of the machine's chest. "That's its weak point." Liam nodded, his eyes locked on the core. He fired another round, aiming for the weak point Zora had pointed out. This time, the shot hit true. The machine let out a screeching metallic sound as its core exploded, sending a burst of energy rippling through the air. The creature crumpled to the ground, its glowing eyes flickering out, but there was no time to celebrate. More machines were emerging from the shadows, each one more powerful than the last. They were relentless, and they were closing in fast. Liam and Zara fought side by side, their movements synchronized as they took down machine after machine. It was a brutal battle, one that tested every ounce of strength and skill they had. But they couldn't keep up forever. For every machine they destroyed, two more appeared in its place. The odds were stacked against them, and the feeling of dread grew with each passing second. The air was thick with the smell of burning metal and the sound of weapons firing. Zara's energy blade was a blur of motion as she sliced through the machines, while Liam fired his plasma rifle with deadly precision. But for every machine that fell, the remaining ones seemed to grow stronger, more determined to defend the transmitter. Then, just as it seemed like they might be overwhelmed, something shifted. The ground shook again, but this time it wasn't from the machines. It was from something else, something bigger. From the trees, a new figure emerged. It was a massive war machine, towering above the others, with a sleek, dark frame and glowing red eyes. Its weaponry was far more advanced, and its presence sent a shockwave of fear through Liam's chest. "This is it," Zara whispered, her voice low and filled with dread. "This is the heart of the system." The final battle had begun. The battle raged on around them, a chaotic storm of sparks, energy blasts, and the relentless screech of metal colliding with metal. Zara and Liam fought with everything they had, but even they could feel the weight of the situation. The massive war machine that had emerged from the shadows was unlike anything they had ever encountered before. It towered over them, its sleek, dark armor glistening with a sinister glow. Its red eyes shone with cold, calculating intelligence as it advanced, every step sending tremors through the ground beneath their feet. Liam's heart pounded in his chest as he took a steadying breath. This was it, the final stand. If they didn't stop this machine now, there would be no future. The transmitter would continue its signal, calling in more reinforcements, and the world would be consumed by the machines. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for humanity's future, a future that seemed to be slipping away with each passing moment. "We need to take it down, now," Zara yelled, her voice fierce but strained. She lunged forward, her energy blade flashing as she attempted to slice through the massive war machine's armor. But the creature was fast, dodging her attack and retaliating with a crushing blow. Zara stumbled back, barely avoiding the deadly strike. Liam's eyes widened as he watched her. She was strong, But this machine was on another level. He couldn't let her fight alone. With a grim determination, he sprinted toward the war machine, his plasma rifle aimed at its exposed core. He fired a round, but the shot barely made a dent in its thick armor. The war machine turned toward him, its glowing eyes narrowing as it raised its massive weapon. The laser beam shot out, and Liam barely managed to dive out of the way in time, feeling the heat of the blast as it scorched the earth beside him. Zara shouted to him, her voice filled with urgency. "We can't take it down like this. We need to find its weak point." Liam's mind raced. He had seen war machines like this before in old military archives, machines designed for one purpose: total destruction. But they all had a flaw, a weakness. If he could just figure it out, they might have a chance. The war machine's massive gun turned once again, and this time it was aimed directly at Zara. Without thinking, Liam threw himself in front of her, taking the brunt of the blast. The force sent him flying backward, his body slamming into the ground with bone-crushing force. Pain shot through his chest, but he gritted his teeth and forced himself to rise. Zara was by his side in an instant, her eyes filled with concern, but there was no time for hesitation. She grabbed his arm, pulling him to his feet. "We can't give up now," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We've come too far." Liam nodded, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, but he knew she was right. They couldn't stop now. There had to be a way to defeat this thing. He just had to find it. As the war machine advanced toward them again, Liam noticed something. The armor on its back was slightly thinner, a faint crack running through the surface. It was a small detail, easy to miss, but in this moment, it was the key. Without wasting another second, he shouted to Zara, "Cover me." He didn't wait for a response. He knew there was no time. With all the strength he could muster, he rushed toward the war machine, dodging its attacks and weaving between the wreckage of fallen machines. His eyes never left the crack in its armor. This was their only chance. Zara followed closely behind, using her agility to stay out of the machine's line of fire. She darted between debris, her energy blade ready for another strike. Together, they moved like a well-coordinated team, every move calculated, every step planned. The war machine loomed closer, its weapon charging up for another attack. But Liam was too focused on his goal to be distracted. He reached the machine's back, just as it fired its weapon. The blast missed him by inches, and he dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the explosion. His pulse raced, but there was no time to lose. He turned toward the crack in the armor and aimed his plasma rifle at it. With one swift pull of the trigger, the shot landed. The crack deepened, and sparks flew as the energy coursed through the machine's core. For a moment, nothing happened. The war machine stood still, its lights flickering, its massive form frozen in place. Then, with a deafening roar, the machine began to collapse, its systems failing one by one. The ground shook as it fell to the earth, the impact sending a shockwave through the area. Liam and Zara stood in stunned silence, their chests heaving with exertion. The war machine was down, but the battle wasn't over yet. There was still the matter of the transmitter, the source of the signal that had caused this chaos in the first place. "We did it," Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It's over." But Liam shook his head. "Not yet. We still have to shut down the transmitter. If we don't, this will all be for nothing." They exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They had come so far, fought so hard, but the final step was still ahead of them. The transmitter was still active, still sending out its deadly signal. And if they didn't stop it now, everything they had fought for would be in vain. Together, they moved toward the machine, their steps heavy with determination. The transmitter loomed ahead of them, a towering monolith of metal and energy. It pulsed with a cold, mechanical rhythm, its lights flickering ominously. This was the heart of the system. the source of the apocalypse, the key to everything. They reached the base of the transmitter, and Zura looked at Liam, her expression grim. "We have to destroy it." Liam nodded. Together, with a final, unified effort, they began to sabotage the machine. Zara used her energy blade to cut through the wiring, while Liam used his rifle to target the core. The machine fought back, its defensive systems activating in an attempt to stop them. But they didn't give up. They couldn't. In the final moments, as the transmitter began to shake and flicker, a sudden calm fell over the battlefield. The machines, the war machines, all of them, stopped moving. The signal was gone. The apocalypse was over. Liam and Zara stood in the silence, their bodies battered and bruised, but their spirits unbroken. The war was over, and though the world had been shattered, there was a glimmer of hope on the horizon. The machines were gone, the transmitter destroyed, and humanity had survived. As they looked out over the ruined landscape, Zara turned to Liam, a faint smile on her lips. "We did it." Liam nodded, his face weary but resolute. "We did." And for the first time in a long while, they allowed themselves to hope.